Today on News Pulse, Russian oil industry collapses because of Ukrainian strikes. Ukraine can train Western allies and not vice versa. Russia attacked Poland in 1939. It prepares to attack it again. Hello, we are UATV. I'm Henry Keane and you are welcome to the News Pulse. After a series of massive Ukrainian drones strikes on key oil refineries and export terminals, Russia's oil pipeline giant Transneft, which handles over 80% of the country's crude and about 9% of global oil production in the world, by the way, has been forced to limit the intake. The company warned that further attacks could damage infrastructure to the level where Russia would have no other choice and no option at all but to severely cut oil production. This poses a serious threat not just to the oil sector of Russia but to the entire Russian economy that is heavily oil addicted. Over the past decade, oil and gas revenues have accounted for between 1/3 and even 1/2 of the federal budget. Ukraine has increased its attacks on Russia's energy sites to weaken its military, obviously, as peace talks stall. Russia's refining capacity has already been slashed by nearly 20%, and since the beginning of 2024, Russian oil refineries have come under regular UAV attack. In August 2025 alone, as many as 17 Russian refineries were hit, some of them located far from the Ukrainian border. More on how Ukraine exactly is targeting the Kremlin's war machine in our reportage.
In the early hours of September 16th, Ukraine's Special Operations Forces struck the Saratov oil refinery, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The facility produces over 20 types of petroleum products. In 2023, it processed 4.8 million tons of crude oil. The Ukrainian General Staff emphasized that hitting the Saratov refinery is a blow to the fuel supply chain of the Russian army. The Saratov oil refinery specializes in the production of gasoline, diesel fuel, fuel oil, as well as various grades of bitumen, vacuum gas oil, technical sulfur, and more. The plant is involved in meeting the needs of the Russian armed forces. From a statement by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Telegram, since early September, the Ukrainian General Staff and the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine's Ministry of Defense have reported at least 5 strikes on oil refineries inside Russia. One of the most significant recent operations was the attack on the Kurishi oil refinery, carried out during the night of September 14th. Kurishi oil refinery is one of the largest oil refineries in Russia. It produces around 80 different petroleum products, including automotive gasoline, diesel fuel, aviation fuel, etc., and is directly involved in supplying the Russian armed forces. From a statement by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Telegram, since early August, Ukrainian defense forces have struck more than a dozen oil refineries across Russia. There are a total of 36 refineries in the Russian Federation, which used to process up to 6 million barrels of oil per day. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, Russia's current refining capacity has dropped by 1.2 million barrels per day. Since the Kremlin continues to prioritize its war efforts against Ukraine, military fuel supply remains intact, while the civilian sector experiences the brunt of the fuel deficit. In Russian-occupied territories and many regions inside Russia, gasoline has become extremely hard to find. Long queues stretch for kilometers at gas stations, and local authorities have imposed limits on fuel sales. On August 27th, the Russian government extended its full ban on gasoline exports for all market participants. For refineries, the ban lasts until September 30th. For other exporters, until the end of October. A massive amount of oil, in the form of diesel fuel, gasoline, and other grades, is no longer reaching not only Russian civilians, but also, indirectly, the Russian army. While the military may still be better off for now, it's just a matter of time. Everything that's being denied to civilians is being rerouted to the army. That's clearly the priority. According to Bloomberg, the gasoline shortage, initially felt in remote Russian regions and occupied Ukrainian territories, may soon reach Moscow and the central regions. Meanwhile, wholesale fuel prices on the SPIMEX Commodities Exchange are hitting record highs. The Ukrainian General Staff has vowed that strikes on Russian oil infrastructure will continue. Russia's refining system is such that about 2/3 of the output is diesel and only 1/3 is gasoline. For now, they still have enough diesel because of that ratio. But hopefully, repeated strikes on the oil and gas sector will eventually cause the system to collapse. Russia doesn't have the capacity to store that much crude oil. That means they'll be forced to shut down oil wells. And once a well is shut down, it's usually permanent. According to the International Energy Agency, Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian refineries have taken offline equipment capable of processing around 250,000 barrels of oil per day. This has led to Russia's lowest crude processing levels since 2022. Reported by Andriy Dmitrenko, UATV News.
Trump's administration clears first Ukraine arms aid paid by allies. Worth noting here, it has been cleared before, already half a year ago. All $60 billion for Ukraine by President Biden. Well, to be precise, it was $60 billion cleared to buy American weapons for Ukraine. So it was $60 billion to be invested in the American economy to produce weaponry for Ukraine. It is not a gift, it never was, and it is now nothing new and nothing more but a partial fulfillment of the obligations taken by previous American administration. The Trump administration and first U.S. weapons aid packages for Ukraine have been approved and goods soon ship as Washington resumes sending arms to Kyiv. Well, this time under a new financial agreement with allies. Two sources familiar with the situation told Reuters about it. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Elbridge Colby has approved as many as two $500 million each shipments under the new mechanism called the Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List, known under the acronym PEARL, the sources confirm. Since then, European states have collectively pledged about $2 billion to the mechanism, and the alliance hopes to raise a total of up to $10 billion.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Ukraine is no longer sending its military to train abroad, instead offering foreign officers and soldiers the opportunity to train on its territory. This was confirmed by the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, in an interview with Sky News. He explained that the war has changed significantly since 2022, and Ukrainian fighters who trained abroad then needed further retraining upon their return to Ukraine. The president clarified that since the beginning of the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, our military personnel have been training in the Baltic countries, Northern Europe, the United Kingdom, Poland, and the United States. However, over time, it became clear that due to the swiftly changing nature of actual combat, it is more efficient to organize training directly in Ukraine.
In 2023, we realized that we could not train our troops in NATO countries anymore because the war had changed and we had to retrain them upon return. And now, after 3.5 years of war, we are not sending our soldiers there, instead inviting NATO officers and representatives of other countries to train in Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky in an interview with Sky News.
Well, Zelensky stressed the obvious, that the current war is extremely high-tech and unprecedented in its dynamics, in particular in the field of UAVs and its development. The new generation of drones comes and goes every 3 months. I think we are in the best shape from a technological point of view, the president noted. He also emphasized that Ukraine and Russia have accumulated unique combat experience as of today, and this experience can be quite useful to allies. The Russians are learning from us. We are learning from the Russians. I think that only Ukraine and Russia have such a level of knowledge today, and we are doing our best to be faster and better. And Ukraine succeeds, actually, as we have no other choices. Necessity indeed breeds the innovation. We are open to Europe with all our technologies, and all we need in return is funding, Zelensky notes. Well, the only thing left worth adding here is the following. All these talks about if Ukraine will ever be accepted to NATO could soon lose all of its relevance whatsoever, with NATO countries standing in line to be accepted by Ukraine for training in Ukraine. That actually counts. A brave new world is already here. On September 17, 1939, Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov announced that the Polish government had effectively ceased to exist as the USSR, Soviet Union, moved to enforce the Hitler-Stalin non-aggression pact, so-called, that is, invading and occupying eastern Poland. By that time, Germany had already begun its assault weeks earlier, launching a brutal invasion on September 1st. Under relentless German air and ground attacks, Polish forces retreated eastward towards Lviv in Galicia, modern Ukraine, hoping to regroup. Instead, they found themselves caught in a pocket. It was a second trap as Soviet troops advanced from the opposite direction. The Ribbentrop-Molotov pact between Hitler and Stalin had destroyed any hope that Poland might find support from Moscow against Adolf Hitler. A secret protocol revealed only decades later in 1990 divided Eastern Europe into German and Soviet spheres of influence, granting the USSR claim to Poland's eastern territories. The Kremlin justified its move by claiming to, I quote, protect Ukrainians and Belarusians living in lands it said Poland had illegally annexed. Does it ring a bell today, doesn't it? With the Wehrmacht pressing from the west and the Red Army from the east, Poland was crushed between two powers. Outmatched by Germany's modern mechanized forces, the Polish military could offer little to none resistance to the Soviet onslaught. While we all remember the Soviet and Nazi Germany aggression against Poland back then, nowadays the threat remains the same, actually. Russian drones invade Polish airspace, explode over residential buildings, and Russia, Belarus, and India hold mutual military drills right near Polish border called Zapad West 2025. With American military, actually, observers present there the same allies that are obliged historically and legally by many binding international agreements to protect Poland from Russian aggression. The same vibes it emanates as German-Soviet cooperation on the brink of World War II. As a proof of sorts to the aforementioned, hard to believe, but Russian forces are actually using Nazi Germany's detonators, even today. The detonators marked with Nazi swastikas were discovered at an ammunition depot uncovered by scouts of Ukrainian 225th Separate Assault Battalion. The devices date back to the period of cooperation between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. Following the agreements of 1939-1940, Moscow received military equipment and components to it from Hitler's regime. Remarkably, some of these detonators have survived for decades and are still being used by Russian troops today. Almost 100 years have passed and Russia is still using the grim fruits of cooperation with Hitler's regime. That said and shown, how could one imply these days that the Russian regime has changed in any way to the better since then? Polish President Karol Nawrocki traveled to Berlin this week, where he once again demanded war reparations from Germany for damages inflicted during World War II. The Conservative Law and Justice Party, led by Jarosław Kaczynski, has been vocal in pushing the claim, often framing Germany as a post-Nazi state for failing to punish many perpetrators. The current government of Donald Tusk has also supported pursuing compensation, though members of his civic platform party prefer to speak of restitution rather than reparation, adopting a more cautious tone.
To build a partnership with our Western neighbor based on truth and good relations, we must finally resolve the reparations issue. As President of Poland, I clearly demand this in the name of all our people, Karol Nawrocki, President of Poland, during a speech in Germany.
And all this is happening while we witness real threats from the east. Russian, Belarusian allied forces staging drills right on the border with Poland, literally showing off how exactly they will invade and occupy Poland and the Baltic states. Good to know that Poland look into the future. Even some politicians are maybe involved in compensating the past. Polish Foreign Minister Sikorski said, I quote, Ukrainians have better equipment to combat Russian drones, as well as much deeper and more relevant experience in confronting the Russian army. That was quoted by the Polish publications on Monday, September 15th. The training will take place on the territory of the Nato training center in Poland. The minister also rejected the claim that Poland's air defenses were unprepared for the attack by Russian drones on the night of September 10th. Well, with only 4 drones out of 19 actually shot down, one can clearly see a need to improve both Polish air defense tactics and strategy. That was it. We are UATV. I'm Henry Keane. Thank you for standing with Ukraine. Please subscribe so to stay tuned to what is happening in the world, shown to you from Ukrainian perspective. Goodbye.